The main character of the book, Holden Caulfield, begins his story by explaining that he is in a psychiatric clinic where he was placed after a nervous breakdown. He immediately warns the reader that he is not going to tell his entire biography or delve into the details of his family. Instead, he focuses on the events that happened to him a few days before Christmas when he was 16 years old. Holden says that his story began when he was studying at Pensy, a prestigious private school for boys. He describes himself as someone who doesn't fit into conventional norms. Holden dislikes the school and has no respect for most of his teachers and classmates, whom he considers hypocritical and phony. He admits that he was expelled from Pensy for failing his classes, and this is not the first school he has been kicked out of. From the very first lines, Holden demonstrates his cynical view of the world. He often uses sarcasm and harsh language to describe those around him. However, behind this cynicism lies deep vulnerability and loneliness. Holden doesn't feel like he belongs in the adult world, which he calls phony, and he struggles to find his place among his peers. He is constantly searching for sincerity, but ends up disappointed in people. His story is an attempt to understand himself and his emotions. Holden says he doesn't want his story to sound like sentimental crap, but from the very beginning, it becomes clear that he is experiencing intense inner conflicts. His voice is that of a teenager who feels lost in a world where, as he sees it, there is no room for sincerity or genuine emotions. Holden's story begins at Pensy, a prestigious private school for boys where he is currently studying. However, he immediately reveals that he has been expelled for failing his classes. This is already the fourth school he has been kicked out of, and he doesn't feel much regret about it. Holden dislikes Pensy and believes that, like everywhere else, the school is full of hypocrisy. He despises most of his classmates and teachers, calling them phonies. Holden describes Pensy as a place where everyone is obsessed with showing off their wealth and status. He doesn't feel like he belongs in this world and constantly criticizes those around him. For example, he mocks the school's headmaster, who, according to Holden, always pays more attention to wealthy parents than to those who are less affluent. Holden sees this as a prime example of the hypocrisy he hates so much. Before leaving the school, Holden decides to say goodbye to Mr. Spencer, his elderly history teacher. Mr. Spencer genuinely cares about Holden and tries to give him advice, but their conversation quickly becomes awkward. Holden feels uncomfortable when the teacher reads aloud his failed history essay. He doesn't want to hear any lectures and internally resents Spencer for reminding him of his failures. While Holden respects Mr. Spencer, he still sees traces of phoniness in him, which irritates him. After visiting Spencer, Holden returns to his dorm room, where he interacts with his dorm mates. His roommate, Stradlater, particularly irritates him. Stradlater is handsome and self-assured, and in Holden's opinion, he is overly full of himself. Holden refers to him as a sexy bastard, because Stradlater often brags about his romantic conquests. When Stradlater asks Holden to write an essay for him, Holden agrees, but deliberately writes about his late brother Allie's baseball glove, instead of following the assigned topic. This reveals how deeply Holden is attached to the memory of his brother and how much Allie's death has affected him. The situation escalates when Holden learns that Stradlater went on a date with Jane Gallagher, a girl who was once very close to Holden. He becomes jealous and worried that Stradlater might have behaved inappropriately with her. This leads to an argument that turns into a physical fight. Stradlater beats Holden, but Holden refuses to show how much it hurts and continues to mock his roommate. After the fight, Holden decides he can no longer stay at Pensy. He packs his belongings and leaves the school in the middle of the night without saying goodbye to anyone. His decision to run away symbolizes his desire to escape everything he perceives as phony and hypocritical. Holden heads to New York City, planning to spend a few days there before his parents find out about his expulsion. He hopes to find something genuine in the city that will help him cope with his inner turmoil. After leaving Pensy Prep, Holden decides to go to New York City. He doesn't want to return home early and disappoint his parents, who are still unaware of his expulsion. Holden plans to spend a few days in the city, hiding from reality and trying to sort out his feelings. This decision is not just an escape from school, but an attempt to run away from everything he considers fake and hypocritical. Holden arrives in New York late at night and checks into a cheap hotel. He describes the hotel as dirty and unpleasant, filled with strange people. From his room window, he observes his neighbors, whom he considers to be behaving perversely. These scenes intensify his disgust with the world around him. Holden feels lonely and lost, but instead of seeking comfort, he delves deeper into his thoughts about phoniness and hypocrisy. To distract himself, Holden decides to visit a nightclub located in the hotel. He orders a drink, even though he's only 16, and tries to strike up a conversation with 3 women sitting at a nearby table. Holden finds them shallow and silly, but still attempts to impress them. He dances with one of them, but soon realizes they are not interested in talking to him and are only looking for entertainment. This deepens his sense of isolation. Back at the hotel, Holden decides to call a prostitute to alleviate his loneliness. However, when a girl named Sunny arrives at his room, Holden cannot bring himself to have sex with her. Instead, he tries to talk to her, but Sunny doesn't understand him and quickly loses patience. Holden feels awkward and vulnerable. Soon after, her pimp, Maurice, comes to his room demanding more money than was agreed upon. When Holden refuses to pay, Maurice beats him up. Afterward, Holden lies on the floor, fantasizing about how he could have taken revenge if he were stronger. This episode highlights his inner weakness and inability to cope with reality. The next day, Holden reminisces about Jane Gallagher, a girl he was close to in the past. Jane is one of the few people Holden considers genuine. He recalls how they spent time together, playing checkers and talking. Holden wants to call her, but is afraid she has changed and become as phony as everyone else. These memories reveal how much Holden longs for sincerity and real connections. Later, Holden calls Sally Hayes, his ex-girlfriend, and invites her on a date. They go ice skating and then to a cafe. Holden tries to explain his feelings about the world, expressing his disgust with society and proposing they run away together to start a new life far from everyone. However, Sally doesn't take him seriously and finds his ideas absurd. Their conversation ends in an argument, and Holden leaves, feeling even more alone. One day, Holden encounters 2 nuns collecting donations. He talks to them and donates money, even though he is nearly broke. Holden admires their sincerity and simplicity, which sharply contrasts with his opinion of most people. This episode shows that Holden is still capable of seeing goodness in others, though such moments are rare for him. Throughout his time in New York, Holden frequently thinks about his younger brother Allie, who died of leukemia. Allie was a symbol of sincerity and kindness for Holden. He carries Allie's baseball glove, on which his brother wrote poems, and considers him the best person he ever knew. Allie's death left a deep wound in Holden's soul, and he still struggles to come to terms with the loss. Holden spends several days in New York, searching for something real, but he is repeatedly met with disappointment. His encounters with people only deepen his sense of isolation and misunderstanding. New York, which he once saw as a place of freedom and opportunity, becomes a symbol of loneliness and loss. After spending several days in New York, Holden decides to visit his younger sister, Phoebe. She is the only person with whom he feels a genuine connection. Holden knows that their parents will be home late, so he sneaks into the apartment at night to see Phoebe without running into them. This moment becomes one of the most touching and emotional scenes in the book. When Holden enters Phoebe's room, she is asleep. He quietly sits next to her and begins to look at her face. Holden admires his sister, calling her smart, kind, and sincere. To him, Phoebe is a symbol of the childlike innocence he so desperately wants to protect. He wakes her up, and Phoebe is immediately happy to see him. However, when she finds out that Holden has been expelled from school again, she becomes upset and says, "Daddy's going to kill you." Phoebe starts asking Holden questions about what he plans to do next. She is smarter and more perceptive than many adults, and Holden appreciates this. However, he cannot give her a clear answer because he himself doesn't know what he wants. Phoebe reproaches him for not liking anything and asks him to name at least one thing he truly loves. Holden cannot answer right away, but after much thought, he says that he loves Allie, his late brother, and Phoebe. Phoebe continues to question Holden about his dreams and plans. At this moment, he tells her about his fantasy, which has become the symbol of the entire book. Holden says he wants to be the catcher in the rye. He imagines himself standing at the edge of a huge rye field where children are playing. His job is to catch the children who might fall off the cliff. For Holden, this image symbolizes his desire to protect children from losing their innocence and from facing the harsh realities of the adult world. This scene reveals Holden's inner world and his fear of growing up. He doesn't want children to lose their sincerity and become as phony as adults. Phoebe listens to him with interest, but doesn't fully understand why he is so afraid of adult life. When Holden says he plans to leave and start a new life far away from everyone, Phoebe unexpectedly offers to go with him. She packs her things and insists on accompanying her brother. Touched by her determination, Holden realizes that he cannot let her leave home and family. He tells her that he has changed his mind about leaving and suggests they go to the zoo instead. Holden and Phoebe go to the zoo, where she rides the carousel. Holden watches her, and for the first time in a long while, feels happy. He realizes that he cannot protect Phoebe and other children from all the difficulties of life, but he can be there to support them. This moment symbolizes Holden's acceptance. He begins to understand that growing up is inevitable, and that his role is not to save everyone, but simply to be there for the people he loves. The episode with Phoebe is a key moment in the book, showing that despite his cynicism and inner conflicts, Holden is capable of deep love and care. Phoebe becomes an anchor for him, helping him not to drown in his own fears and doubts. After meeting with Phoebe, Holden feels a little better, but his inner anxiety and fear of the future do not go away. He decides to seek help from his former teacher, Mr. Antolini, who was once his mentor and someone he respected. Holden hopes that Mr. Antolini will be able to give him some advice, or at least listen to him. Mr. Antolini lives in New York with his wife. When Holden arrives late in the evening, his teacher greets him warmly and hospitably. He offers Holden to stay for the night so he can rest. Mr. Antolini is an intelligent and insightful person who genuinely cares about Holden. He notices that Holden is in a deep crisis and tries to help him. During their conversation, Mr. Antolini tells Holden that he is heading for a great fall. He explains that this fall happens to people who cannot or do not want to adapt to society. Mr. Antolini warns that if Holden does not change his attitude toward life, he may end up in complete isolation and lose himself. He advises Holden to find something that truly interests him and dedicate himself to it in order to find meaning in life. Mr. Antolini also quotes the words of Danish philosopher Wilhelm Rasmussen: "A person's maturity lies in finding what is worth living for and accepting it." He tries to convey to Holden the idea that growing up and taking responsibility is not a weakness, but a necessity. However, Holden, as usual, perceives these words with distrust. He respects Mr. Antolini, but his cynicism prevents him from taking this advice seriously. After the conversation, Holden lies down to sleep on the couch in the living room. However, in the middle of the night, he wakes up and sees Mr. Antolini sitting next to him and stroking his head. Holden gets scared and perceives this gesture as an attempt at sexual harassment. He quickly gathers his things and leaves the apartment without waiting for any explanations. This episode becomes another blow for Holden. He feels betrayed by someone he trusted. However, it remains unclear whether Mr. Antolini truly had ill intentions or if Holden simply misinterpreted his actions. This moment highlights how vulnerable Holden is and how inclined he is to see only the worst in people. After leaving Mr. Antolini's apartment, Holden feels even more lonely and lost. He begins to doubt whether he can find anyone who understands and supports him. This incident strengthens his fear of adults and the world he considers fake. Holden continues to wander around New York, not knowing where to go or what to do next. The episode with Mr. Antolini is one of the most complex and ambiguous moments in the book. It shows how deeply Holden's fear of adults and their world is rooted. Even when someone genuinely tries to help him, Holden cannot accept the help because his distrust and inner wounds are too strong. This moment also highlights his loneliness and inability to cope with reality. After leaving Mr. Antolini's place, Holden continues to wander through New York City. He feels completely lost, and both his physical and emotional state deteriorate. Holden starts thinking about running away from the city and decides to go somewhere far, where no one knows him. He dreams of living in isolation, away from a society he believes is fake and hypocritical. Before leaving, Holden writes a letter to his younger sister Phoebe to say goodbye. He asks her to meet him at a specific place so he can return the money she had given him. Holden doesn't want Phoebe to worry about him, but at the same time, he can't leave without seeing her one last time. When Holden arrives at the meeting place, he sees that Phoebe has brought a suitcase with her. She says she wants to go with him. This gesture touches Holden, but he understands that he cannot let Phoebe leave home and family for him. He tries to convince her to go back home, but Phoebe stubbornly insists on her decision. Holden feels guilty for involving his sister in his troubles. To calm Phoebe down, Holden suggests going to the zoo. They walk around the zoo and Phoebe gradually starts to feel better. Eventually, they reach the carousel, and Holden persuades Phoebe to take a ride. He watches her as she rides, and for the first time in a long while, he feels happy. This moment becomes a symbol of hope and love for Holden. He realizes that he cannot protect Phoebe and other children from all the hardships of life, but he can be there to support them. Holden describes this moment as one of the happiest of his life. He looks at Phoebe and realizes that despite all his fears and doubts, he loves her and wants her to be happy. This episode symbolizes Holden's acceptance. He begins to understand that growing up is inevitable, and his job is not to save everyone, but simply to be there for those he loves. The story ends with Holden talking about his current state. He is in a psychiatric clinic where he was placed after a nervous breakdown. Holden doesn't go into details about how he got there, but he mentions that his brother DB, who works as a screenwriter in Hollywood, visits him often. Holden says that he misses the people he talked about in his story, even those he considered phony. He admits that, despite all his complaints about the world, he cannot completely shut himself off from it. This admission shows that Holden is beginning to understand the complexity of human relationships and his own vulnerability. Holden mentions that he will soon return home and may go to a new school. He doesn't know what he will do next, but he hopes things will get better. His words sound uncertain, but there is a hint of hope in them. Holden no longer talks about running away or isolation, which might mean that he is starting to accept reality and is ready to move forward. Holden ends his story with the words, "Don't tell anyone anything. If you do, you'll start missing everyone." This phrase emphasizes his inner conflict. On one hand, he wants to be sincere and open, but on the other, he fears the attachment and pain that it may bring.